Step out of the car right now, or I will pull you out myself. Those were the first words Officer Patrick Riley delivered. Not a greeting, not a question. A command sharpened by suspicion. His voice cut through the rain as if Marcus Thompson were already guilty of something he had not done. Riley's flashlight struck the side of the Honda Accord, then the window, then Marcus's eyes. He repeated the order, slower this time, as if speaking to a man he had already decided to treat without dignity. I said, step out. Do it now. Marcus had seen thousands of stops in his career. He had reviewed countless videos. He had read painful accounts written by people who trembled as they remembered the same type of voice. He knew this tone. He knew what it meant. And as the lights flashed across his glasses, he understood that tonight he was no longer the investigator. He was the target. Before going into this story, take a moment to tell me where you are watching from. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and give me a like. It helps more than you know. Marcus had left his office only 15 minutes earlier. 14 hours. That was how long he had spent inside the Civilian Office of Police Accountability building that day, moving from meeting to meeting, reviewing allegations, and tracing patterns that seemed obvious only to those who knew where to look. He had planned to go home, sit with his wife, and tell her he would finally rest this weekend. But the blue lights in his rearview mirror ended that hope. He slowed the Accord and pulled onto the shoulder of Interstate 90. Cars hissed past in the rain. His wipers worked hard against the October downpour. He took a breath, steady and measured, as if preparing to brief a full committee. Then he lowered the window. Riley moved with a certain practiced confidence, the type that came from years of unquestioned authority. His jacket was soaked, but he did not care. He leaned in. Broken tail light. He said. Marcus glanced at his dashboard, puzzled. He had checked the car 2 days ago. Nothing was broken. My taillight is functioning. Officer, he replied. His voice remained calm. He carried himself like a man trained not to escalate. But calm was not what Riley wanted. You arguing with me? Riley asked. The words came with a subtle challenge, as if he were waiting for permission to become harsher. Marcus answered softly. No, I'm simply stating the light is intact. Riley stepped back, annoyed. He motioned for his partner, Officer Dylan Wilkins, who was rolling up behind him in another squad car. Wilkins approached with an uneasy expression, the kind that belonged to a man who knew what his partner liked to do during late-night stops. Riley whispered something to him, something Marcus could not hear. Dylan's shoulders tightened. He gave a short nod. Then he moved to the passenger side, eyes scanning the interior suspiciously. Marcus placed both hands on the wheel, open and visible. He announced every movement the way he had advised others to do in countless community meetings. My wallet is in my jacket. I am reaching for it now. Riley did not respond. Instead, he circled the car slowly, shining his light across the trunk, the plates, the windows, as if searching for a justification he had not yet found. At that moment, 2 strangers entered the story. The first was Mike Dawson, a long-haul trucker from Iowa who had seen the flashing lights ahead. Something about the stance of the officers unsettled him. He pulled his semi onto the shoulder, stepped out with his phone, and began recording. He had no plan. He only knew he had seen too many videos start this way. He would later say he felt a responsibility he could not explain. The second was Emily Patel, a 20-something activist and live streamer who happened to be driving home from a late event near the city. She recognized the stretch of Interstate 90. She also recognized the unbroken cycle of viral tragedies that seemed to begin with the same conditions. Without hesitation, she opened her door, stepped into the rain, and raised her phone. Within seconds, 100 people were watching. Within minutes. Thousands. Marcus heard his phone vibrate in the center console. It was Anna, his wife. She never called twice unless something was deeply wrong or unless she sensed something was wrong with him. He could not answer. He kept his hands on the wheel. He breathed once more, slow and steady. He knew protocol. He understood danger, and he recognized the weight of a moment that could decide everything. Riley returned to the window. "Step out," he repeated. His voice carried the sharp edge of readiness. Marcus replied, "Officer, may I ask the reason for—" But Riley cut him off. "Step out." The rain intensified. The traffic roared. The tension grew heavy enough to feel like another presence on the highway. Riley's hand hovered near his belt, not on the weapon, not yet, but near enough that the intention was unmistakable. Marcus opened the door. He rose slowly, every movement measured. He faced Riley, hands open, palms forward. The live stream captured everything. Emily steadied her voice. "Sir, I am recording for your safety," she said. Her viewers were sending messages. "Stay calm. Keep filming. Who is he? Why is this happening?" The comments flickered upward faster than she could read. Riley stepped close. Too close. "You nervous?" he asked. It sounded like a taunt, not a concern. Marcus answered truthfully. "No." He paused. "But I am cautious." Riley smirked at the word, cautious. Interesting. He circled Marcus again, the way he had circled the car. Rain drenched Marcus's shoulders. His clothes stuck to his skin, but he remained still. He understood that sudden movements fed suspicion. He had taught that in workshops. He had written it in public guides, and yet tonight the rules seemed almost hollow, because the danger came not from misunderstanding, but from intent. Then everything shifted. Riley demanded permission to search the vehicle. No explanation. No probable cause. No reason beyond a desire to assert power. Marcus answered calmly, "Officer, I do not consent to a search." Riley stepped forward. His face hardened. "You sure you want to say that?" His voice lowered. "People who refuse searches usually have something to hide." Marcus felt the first flash of anger beneath his restraint, but he controlled it. "I have nothing to hide," he said, "and I am within my rights." Wilkins looked away, ashamed. Emily's live stream surged to over 50,000 viewers. The comments exploded. Mike continued to film, wide-eyed and determined. And then Riley asked the question that changed everything. "Who do you work for?" Marcus met his eyes. He answered clearly, "I am the executive director of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability." The rain did not stop. The sirens did not fade. But the power in the air shifted in an instant. Riley froze. Wilkins swallowed hard, and Emily whispered into her phone, "Oh my God, this is the man who investigates them. Everything that followed would change Chicago." But tonight, on the side of Interstate 90, it all began with a taillight that was never broken. Marcus did not intend to reveal his badge so early, but the moment Riley demanded to know who he worked for, the truth came out with the steady force of a man prepared to stand by it. "I am the executive director of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability," he said again, clearly and without hesitation. The words did not echo, they did not rise in volume, yet they struck Riley harder than any raised voice could for one suspended second. Everything on that rain-soaked highway froze. Riley's authority, Wilkins's composure. The false assurance that this would be another stop that disappeared into silence. The badge Marcus carried had no weapon attached to it, but it carried something that frightened officers who had something to hide. It carried oversight. It carried the power to pull back curtains they had kept closed for years. Riley recovered first, though not gracefully. His jaw tightened. His breath hitched as if he had walked into a wall he had not seen. He stepped back, but only an inch, unwilling to show retreat. "Prove it," he said. The words sounded brittle. Marcus reached slowly into his jacket, narrating each motion the way he had done from the moment the stop began. He withdrew his Civilian Office of Police Accountability identification card. The laminate caught the flash of Riley's light. The edges gleamed. Riley leaned in, squinting, reading every line. His throat moved as he swallowed. Then he stepped away as if the badge itself were radioactive. Wilkins glanced at the card from a distance. A tremor crossed his face. He recognized the name. Every officer in his unit recognized the name. Marcus Thompson had been the one pushing hardest for new reporting standards. He had been the one demanding accountability for cameras that accidentally malfunctioned. He was the reason several of their colleagues had faced discipline. And now he stood in front of them, soaked in rain, betrayed by the same system he had worked to fix. Emily's live stream audience soared past 100,000. Viewers typed comments that Emily could barely process. "That's the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. He investigates these stops. This explains everything." Her voice trembled as she narrated quietly. He showed them his credentials. He really is the director. She tried to steady the camera. She knew she was witnessing something that would matter long after the rain stopped. Riley changed his tone, but not his intentions. "You should have told me sooner," he said. The words sounded hollow, empty of sincerity. Marcus responded evenly. "I did not believe I needed to announce my job before answering a question." Riley forced a strained smile, a gesture too artificial to mask his panic. "Well," he said, "we can clear this up." His voice lacked the confidence it held moments earlier. Fear crept behind his eyes. Not fear of violence, fear of exposure. He reached to activate his body camera, pretending as though he had simply forgotten to turn it on earlier. The click came too late. Marcus watched the gesture and spoke calmly. "Your body camera should have been recording from the beginning." Riley stiffened. He wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat. Emily's audience exploded with comments. He tried to turn it on now. It was off the whole time. This is bad for him. The live stream fed the truth in real time. Sergeant Laura Hayes arrived minutes later. Her wipers flung arcs of water as she stepped from her SUV. She walked quickly toward Riley and Wilkins, her posture sharp, her expression severe. She was the kind of supervisor who spoke in clipped sentences and believed misconduct was solved by burying it, not preventing it, not correcting it, burying it. She reached the group and spoke with authority. "What is going on?" she asked. Riley stepped forward, almost blocking Marcus from view. "Nothing serious," he said. "A misunderstanding." But Hayes noticed the tension. She noticed the badge Marcus held, and she noticed the two bystanders recording everything. Her eyes narrowed. "Who is he?" she asked, before Riley could answer. Marcus spoke. "I am the executive director of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability." Hayes froze for a fraction of a second. She had buried more than one complaint involving Riley's team. She had rewritten narratives. She had dismissed patterns that were too clear to ignore. And now, standing in the rain, she saw the one man she hoped she would never meet during a stop. Her jaw tightened. She forced a controlled breath. "Director Thompson," she said. "There must be some confusion here," Marcus replied with calm precision. "The confusion began when I was pulled over for a taillight that was fully functioning." His tone remained formal, but his authority was unmistakable. Hayes attempted to regain control. "Let us handle this," she said, turning toward Riley with a stare that was half warning, half blame. Riley avoided her eyes. Wilkins looked at the ground. Behind them, a much quieter drama unfolded. Detective Brian Kane, monitoring the unit's group chat from home, noticed sudden activity, Officers posted frantic messages. Someone typed. Riley stopped the Civilian Office of Police Accountability Director. Another wrote, "Turn your cams on." And then the message that revealed everything. Delete everything. Kane read those words and did not hesitate. He deleted it, and then he deleted it again. He did not know that Sarah Nguyen, Civilian Office of Police Accountability's lead investigator, would later recover every archived file. He believed the old tricks would work. He believed secrecy could outpace accountability. Emily's live stream crossed 150,000 viewers in under an hour. She spoke softly but firmly. They called a supervisor. They are trying to figure out what to do. Her voice carried a mixture of urgency and disbelief. The world was watching. Not later. Not tomorrow. Now. Anna called again. The phone vibrated in Marcus's pocket. This time he answered. "I am safe," he said quietly, though he knew the moment was far from finished. She asked where he was. He gave her his location and promised he would come home soon. His words were steady, but Anna could hear the strain beneath them. She did not press him. She said, "I love you," and he answered the same. Hayes stepped closer. "Director Thompson, you are free to leave," she said. The sentence came with an undertone of urgency. She wanted him off the highway. She wanted the cameras gone. She wanted to bury the night before it buried her unit. But Marcus remained firm. "I will leave," he said, "after you provide your names and badge numbers for the record." Hayes hesitated. Riley hesitated longer. Wilkins complied immediately. As if relieved, someone finally asked, a mile away, in her apartment. Sarah Nguyen's phone lit up. A message from Emily's live stream reached her feed. Someone had tagged the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. Sarah clicked. She saw the rain, the lights, Marcus's silhouette. She saw Riley's posture and the urgency in Hayes's movements. She understood instantly that the night had just changed everything. She grabbed her keys. She left her apartment without a coat. The investigation had already begun. And on Interstate 90, the rain continued. But the silence was gone. The badge had shifted the ground beneath their feet, and the truth had already slipped beyond the officer's control. The live stream would cross 2 million views by dawn, and the city of Chicago would wake to a storm that did not come from the sky. By sunrise, Chicago had already changed. The rain stopped, but the echoes of the night before moved through the city with quiet force, carried not by rumor or speculation, but by video. Emily Patel's live stream reached 2 million views before most people finished their morning coffee. Newsrooms downloaded the footage. Activists clipped it into short segments. Community groups posted it with careful captions. And the comments poured in from every direction. Some expressed fear. Others expressed anger. Many simply wrote, "Here we go again," with the exhaustion of people who had lived this story too many times, for the first time. Though, the man in the video was not a powerless driver. He was the head of the agency responsible for investigating the very officers who had targeted him. That fact struck the city like a bolt. It revealed a truth many had suspected, but few had seen so plainly. If the director of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability could be stopped like this, then anyone could. And if Riley treated him this way, how did he treat the people who had no badge to hold up in their defense? Lisa Chen, an investigative reporter for the Chicago Tribune, sat at her desk before dawn, coffee untouched. She watched the video 4 times, pausing at key moments. Marcus stepped out of the car. Riley's tone shifted when he saw the badge. Sergeant Hayes trying to contain the collapse. The bystanders recording in silence. Lisa recognized the significance immediately. She opened a new document and wrote the first line of what would become a year-long reporting series. A tail light that was never broken has cracked open a door the city has refused to look through. She typed steadily, assembling the evidence with care. She confirmed Marcus's role. She cross-checked Riley's disciplinary history. She reached out to the American Civil Liberties Union, Civilian Office of Police Accountability, and the Mayor's Office for comment. Then she hit publish. Her article went live at 7:12 a.m., and within 20 minutes, it was the most read story on the Tribune's website, across the city, inside the Civilian Office of Police Accountability headquarters. Sarah Nguyen arrived early. She walked straight to Marcus's office and found him sitting at his desk, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. His jacket hung over the chair. His hair was slightly damp. He had not slept. Sarah closed the door behind her. "I have seen the footage," she said. Marcus nodded. "There is no need to debate the start." He answered, "We begin an emergency investigation today." His voice was controlled, but she sensed the weight he carried. Sarah opened her notebook and began listing the steps. Officer identification, body camera audit, dispatch review, radio logs, supervisory actions. She wrote each line with precision. She had launched investigations before, but this one was different, not because Marcus was the victim, but because the evidence showed a pattern she had suspected for years, a pattern no one had been willing to admit outright. Sarah briefed her team in a short meeting. She spoke with steady confidence. "This is not a routine stop gone wrong," she said. "This is a window into a larger structure. We will pursue every angle." Her investigators listened in silence. They understood the stakes. They understood the scrutiny. They also knew Sarah would not allow this case to be dismissed, delayed, or watered down. Meanwhile, in a small apartment on the south side, Dylan Wilkins sat at his kitchen table. Head in his hands, he had slept poorly. He had seen his own face reflected back at him from 1,000 screens. He had listened to Riley tell Hayes that Marcus was clear to go only after his badge appeared. And Wilkins realized something painful. He had become part of a machine he no longer respected. He had not struck anyone. He had not shouted. He had not pulled a gun. Yet he had participated. His silence had fed the same system his conscience had begun to resist. He opened his phone. The group chat was in chaos. Half the officers blamed Riley. The other half blamed the bystanders. Someone typed, "We need to fix this before the lawyers get involved." Dylan stared at the message until it blurred. Then he closed the chat and turned off his phone. For the first time, he considered the possibility that he could not stay in that unit much longer. At the Thompson home, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his father, Elijah. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting soft lines across the old man's face. Elijah watched the video once, then turned to his son. His voice was steady. "This was not about you," he said. "This was about what they thought you were before you spoke." Marcus nodded. He understood. Elijah continued, "I told you what happened to me in 1992. I told you they beat me because they said my taillight was out. That stop took something from me, but seeing this," his voice cracked, "just slightly, seeing them pull you out the same way, that took something from me again." Marcus looked down. Elijah rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "But this time," he said, "the world saw it. That matters." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about the investigation he was about to lead. He thought about the people who had trusted the Civilian Office of Police Accountability to fix the problems that seemed to grow faster than they could be addressed. And he thought about the responsibility he now carried, not as a victim, but as a witness who had been forced into the center of a storm. As the morning progressed, calls began flowing into the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. Community groups demanded updates. Local officials urged caution. Activists demanded transparency. Reporters sought comment from every direction. Marcus released a simple statement. "We will follow the evidence without fear or favor." He said nothing more. He did not talk about the stop. He did not offer personal emotion. He knew the investigation itself had to speak. at the American Civil Liberties Union office. Attorney Tom Rivera watched the video with a practiced eye. He paused at keyframes, noting the absence of probable cause, the failure to activate cameras, and the clear shift in behavior after Marcus identified himself. He drafted a memo outlining potential civil claims not only for Marcus, but for others who had experienced similar stops from the same tactical unit. He had names, he had affidavits, and now he had a catalyst. By mid-afternoon, the video had reached nearly 5 million views. The mayor issued a statement calling the footage concerning the police superintendent promised cooperation, but behind the scenes. A quiet panic spread through the department. Supervisors scrambled to collect reports. Officers debated which narratives to submit. Others warned each other not to talk at all. And as the city braced for the days ahead, Marcus made a decision that would define the rest of the story. He asked Lisa Chen for an interview, not to defend himself, not to attack the officers, but to explain, with calm conviction, why this moment mattered. This is not about a taillight, he told her. This is about trust. The spark had been lit, and Chicago was only beginning to understand how far the fire would reach. The breakthrough came quietly. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden confession, no televised revelation. It began with a simple discovery made by Sarah Nguyen late one evening, long after the rest of the building had emptied. She sat alone in the dim light of her office, scrolling through data logs that most investigators would have overlooked. Her eyes moved carefully across a list of digital entries tied to the tactical unit involved in Marcus's stop. She noticed irregular timestamps. She saw clusters of deleted files. And she recognized the familiar signs of a communication system officers often used when they wanted to avoid official channels. Zello, a push-to-talk messaging app. The Civilian Office of Police Accountability had never fully accessed those archives before. But tonight, the door opened. Sarah clicked a small icon, waited, and watched the screen fill with scrolling text. Hundreds of messages, hundreds of images, hundreds of clues to a culture that operated in the shadows. She read slowly, allowing each line to sink in. Then she stopped breathing for a moment as she saw the first meme, and then the second, and then the 10th. Some were crude, some were hateful. All revealed a reality far darker than anything she had prepared herself for. The chat threads did not hide their intentions. Officers spoke openly of hunting trips to the South Side. They rated drivers by skin tone. They joked about turning off their body cameras. They used coded phrases. But the meaning was unmistakable. Cold nights, warm numbers, same lot, same faces. If they look nervous, that is enough. The messages carried casual cruelty, as if speaking this way had become ordinary. Sarah scrolled further. She found screenshots of internal maps marking productive blocks. She saw photos officers had taken of motorists during stops without any investigative purpose. She found videos accompanied by captions she refused to read twice. Each message struck her like a weight placed quietly on her chest, and she felt a deep and steady sadness that mixed with determination. She printed the logs. She printed the memes. She printed the message that froze her hand halfway to the tray. It was the same message Kane had typed the night of the stop. Delete everything. Sarah placed the papers in a folder and closed it with care, as if she were holding evidence far more powerful than its physical size suggested. She walked down the quiet hallway toward Marcus's office and knocked lightly. Marcus opened the door, still wearing the same steady expression he had carried since the night on Interstate 90. Sarah handed him the folder. "You need to see this," she said. He sat at his desk and read each page, slowly, without a sound. His face did not shift, but Sarah saw the tension in his shoulders. He turned to the page showing the hunting reference. He paused on a meme that mocked complaints filed by black motorists. He read the line about productive nights twice. Finally, he set the folder down. "We have enough to open a structural investigation," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a firmness that filled the room. Sarah nodded. She felt the same weight, the same clarity. She knew this was no longer about one stop, one officer, or one night. This was about a network, the next morning. Marcus called a meeting. His leadership team gathered around a long table. He presented the documents carefully, allowing each person to absorb the scope of what had been uncovered. Several investigators shook their heads in disbelief. One lowered her gaze, overcome by emotion. Another whispered, "This explains everything." Marcus spoke calmly. "This material is disturbing, but it is necessary. We will pursue every officer involved. We will follow the evidence, no shortcuts." The team agreed. Their expressions carried a mix of determination and grief. Meanwhile, across the city, panic grew inside the tactical unit. Officers whispered in hallways. They checked their phones compulsively. They deleted messages. They warned each other about possible investigations. Word spread quickly that the Civilian Office of Police Accountability was reviewing something big. No one knew the details, but everyone feared the same outcome: exposure. Among them was Officer Dylan Wilkins. He sat in his patrol car during his break, staring at his phone. He saw the messages from months past. He saw the conversations he had chosen not to participate in, but had silently witnessed. He remembered the jokes that made him uneasy, the patterns he had ignored, the instructions he had followed without question, and he realized something he had been avoiding. His silence was not neutral. It was complicity. He placed his phone on the dashboard. He took a long breath. Then he made a decision that would change the direction of the case. That afternoon, he walked into the Civilian Office of Police Accountability Headquarters and asked to speak with Sarah. She met him in a small interview room. He sat across from her, hands shaking slightly. "I want to talk," he said. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. "But I need to know I will be protected." Sarah nodded. "If you provide full cooperation, we can discuss limited immunity." Wilkins swallowed hard. "I will tell you everything," he said. His confession began slowly. At first, he spoke about Riley's behavior during stops. Then he described Kane's habit of rewriting reports. He spoke about nights when the unit targeted certain neighborhoods intentionally. And finally, with visible shame, he admitted to watching the group chat unfold without intervening. Sarah listened without judgment. She asked careful questions. She guided him gently but firmly through each detail. When he finished, he looked exhausted. "I do not want to be part of that anymore," he said. Sarah closed her notebook. "Then help us make sure it ends." As Wilkins left the building, Tom Rivera, the American Civil Liberties Union attorney, arrived with a stack of files. He had reviewed dozens of complaints from motorists who described similar treatment from the same unit. Now, with the group chat revealed and a cooperating officer stepping forward, the evidence formed a clear pattern. Tom met with Marcus and laid out his plan. "We are filing a class action lawsuit," he said. "You will be the lead plaintiff. So will the 27 others whose cases align with this pattern." Marcus hesitated. "I do not want this to be about me," he said. Tom replied gently, "It will not be. It will be about the truth." Later that evening, Lisa Chen contacted Marcus again. She spoke carefully. Aware of the pressure he was under, "I need to confirm the authenticity of the group chat." She said, "People deserve to know what is happening." Marcus responded measuredly, "The investigation is active. We will release what we can." Lisa thanked him and ended the call. She sensed that something far larger than a single article was beginning to unfold across Chicago. The story expanded. The footage, the chat logs, the confession, the lawsuit. The silence that had protected the unit for years began to fracture, and as the city braced for what would come next, Marcus understood the weight of the moment clearly. The stop had been the spark, the chat was the fuel, and now, for the first time in decades, the entire structure behind the blue wall of silence stood within reach of the truth. The numbers arrived like a quiet avalanche. They did not shout, they did not dramatize, they simply revealed. 18 months of stop data, compiled by Civilian Office of Police Accountability analysts and cross-checked with American Civil Liberties Union researchers, formed a picture so clear that no one could claim confusion. 412 traffic stops tied to the same tactical unit. 89% of the drivers were black or brown. Only 22% of the stops produced any contraband, and even that small number fell apart under closer review. Half of those discoveries came from searches that had no lawful basis. When Sarah read the final summary, she felt a heaviness settle into her chest. The group chat had shown the culture. The numbers now showed the harm. Side by side, they formed a structure, a network, a pattern no longer hidden in shadows or buried inside handwritten reports. Marcus reviewed the statistics with deliberate care. He traced them with his finger the way a constitutional scholar might examine an old document. He looked not at the percentages, but at the lives inside them. The students, nurses, janitors, single parents, grandfathers, and young professionals whose only mistake was driving through a corridor known for unfair stops. He closed the binder. Then he opened it again. He needed to see it twice to feel the full truth. When he finally pushed it aside, he said quietly, "This is the case." Sarah nodded. She felt the same sense of clarity. There would be no retreat, no compromise, no buried footnote. This investigation would be complete, and it would be public, while the Civilian Office of Police Accountability advanced its case. The officers inside the unit felt the walls closing in. Detective Brian Kane, the one who had written false reports for years, sensed that his old tactics would no longer protect him. He sat at his desk, staring at a screen filled with past narratives that might soon be questioned line by line. He thought of the nights he had rewritten scenes to shield his colleagues. He remembered the trials where he had testified with confidence he no longer felt. Now, every word he had written seemed to carry weight he had not imagined. And when Sarah's investigators summoned him for an interview, he felt the ground beneath him shift. He answered questions cautiously. He avoided details, but the evidence contradicted him. And for the first time in his career, the truth outran his ability to shape it. Sergeant Laura Hayes reacted differently. She went on the offensive. She called Wilkins into her office, closed the door, and spoke with a controlled voice that concealed her worry. "You need to be careful," she said. "You do not want to put yourself in a position you cannot escape." Her tone carried the quiet force of a supervisor who had buried complaints for years. Wilkins kept his eyes down. He did not tell her he had already spoken to the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. He did not tell her he had agreed to cooperate. Hayes spoke again. "There are people counting on your silence." He looked up slowly. "I cannot," he said. She stiffened. She understood exactly what that meant. Her expression hardened. "Then you need a lawyer," she said, turning away. It was the last real conversation they would ever have. While tension built within the unit, courage surfaced outside it. Mike Dawson, the long-haul trucker who had filmed the stop, received threats from anonymous numbers. Some messages told him to delete the video. Others warned him that testifying would make life harder. Mike saved each message. He told no one at first. Then he called Tom Rivera at the American Civil Liberties Union and said, "I am still testifying." Tom thanked him with quiet sincerity. "You are doing the right thing," he said. Mike replied. "Someone has to." His voice carried the steady conviction of a man who had lived through difficult years and had no patience left for intimidation. Meanwhile, Emily Patel continued releasing short clips from her live stream. Each had a different focus. The moment Riley demanded the search. The moment he turned his camera on too late. The moment Hayes arrived and tried to contain the scene. The city watched, one clip at a time, and the story reached communities that had known this experience all their lives, for them. The footage did not reveal something new. It confirmed what they had been saying for decades, as the pressure mounted. The United States Department of Justice took notice. Pattern or practice cases were rare, reserved for situations where misconduct was woven into the structure of a department rather than isolated in single events. But the combination of data, chat logs, witness testimony, and public outrage formed a compelling mosaic. The Department of Justice sent a formal letter to the Chicago Police Department, requesting internal files, training records, and complaint histories tied to the unit. The announcement made headlines across the country. Some officers reacted with shock, others reacted with resignation, many reacted with anger. But the reality was unmistakable. The federal government had entered the story, in one meeting. As reporters gathered outside Civilian Office of Police Accountability headquarters, Marcus spoke with Sarah and Tom about the next steps. He sat at the conference table, his posture straight, his voice even. "We need to prepare for the consequences," he said. "Not just for the officers involved, but for the city." Sarah agreed. "This will reshape the department," she said. "It needs to," Tom added. "The lawsuit will strengthen the case. People need to see the full picture." Marcus looked at both of them. "This is not about punishment," he said quietly. "It is about truth, and the truth has to stand on its own." The next major development came when the Tribune published Lisa Chen's second article. She had spent days confirming each detail. She verified the chat logs. She interviewed members of the community. She tracked the complaint histories of Riley, Hayes, Kane, and the other officers. Her article opened with a simple line. "The numbers do not lie." It was not dramatic. It was not poetic. Yet it carried undeniable force. Her readers felt the weight of it. They shared it widely. It became a reference point for discussions in classrooms, at community meetings, and in city council gatherings, within the police department. The internal atmosphere grew heavy. Some officers avoided the hallways, others whispered about the investigations, still others defended the unit, speaking of morale and tradition, but even they knew the pattern could not be ignored. And when the Department of Justice investigators toured precinct offices for preliminary interviews, the mood shifted further. It became clear that the network built over years was beginning to collapse under the weight of its own secrecy. As evening settled over the city, Marcus sat alone in his office, reviewing the final tally of stops once more. He read the stories of the people behind the numbers, the father rushing home to his children, the nurse driving after a night shift, the grandmother heading to her church, the student returning from a late class. He understood that their experiences formed the heart of the case, and he felt a quiet, steady sense of duty. The network had been exposed. The numbers were public. The voices were rising, and the city was preparing for a reckoning that had been delayed for far too long. The reckoning arrived slowly at first, then all at once, as if the weight of months had finally gathered enough momentum to push everything forward. It began with a disciplinary hearing held inside a modest room at police headquarters. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic confrontations, only a careful, measured presentation of evidence gathered by the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. Marcus sat at the side of the room, silent and steady, while Sarah led the proceedings with the precision of someone who understood both the stakes and the history behind them. Before her lay thousands of pages of data, transcripts, audio logs, and chat screenshots. Together they formed a record that could not be ignored or softened. Officer Patrick Riley was called in first. He took his seat with a stiff jaw and a posture made rigid by fear he refused to admit when shown the footage. He offered explanations that faltered under the weight of the facts. His voice shifted between defensiveness and hesitation. His claims contradicted the video. His reasoning contradicted procedure. And when the chat logs were introduced, the silence in the room deepened. Riley looked away. Sarah asked him whether he had participated in the culture exposed through the messages. He hesitated. Then he stated, "I do not recall." It was the same phrase he had used in previous interviews across his career. But this time the evidence stood beside his words, steady and immovable. His evasions carried no power. The hearing ended with a 30-day suspension, the maximum allowed under internal rules, but everyone present knew the consequences would not stop there. Officer Wilkins came next. He sat with a different expression, not defensive, not proud, simply exhausted. He answered each question with quiet honesty. He described the culture inside the unit. He explained how officers turned off their cameras without hesitation. He admitted the moments in which he had remained silent when he should have spoken. His voice carried a note of regret that felt genuine. At the end of his statement, he looked down at his hands. "I want to make this right," he said. His testimony earned him leniency, a 5-day suspension, a demotion, a transfer. It did not erase his past decisions, but it opened a path for his future. He walked out of the hearing room knowing he would never return to the same unit, and perhaps never to the same version of himself. Sergeant Hayes faced a more complex process. Her supervisory role meant that she bore responsibility for the culture beneath her. She arrived with an air of confidence that had once defined her career. She stated that she had acted in good faith and done what was necessary to maintain order. But as Sarah laid out the timeline of decisions, omissions, and buried complaints, Hayes's expression tightened. The documents showed patterns she had dismissed repeatedly. The numbers revealed a structure she had defended, and the chat logs displayed a climate she had allowed to grow unchecked. When the questioning ended, Hayes's voice was restrained but trembling. The findings were clear. She was forced to retire. Her pension was forfeited. The quiet dignity she once projected no longer held weight. She left the room with a face that revealed both anger and a deep sense of loss. Detective Brian Kane entered with a measured step and placed his hands on the table as if bracing himself. He had practiced his answers. He had rehearsed his tone, but the investigators confronted him with proof that could not be softened by careful language. 3 cases where his reports conflicted with dispatch logs. 2 cases where his testimony lacked factual foundation. 1 case where he had written a narrative that contradicted body camera footage. He tried to explain. He tried to frame his decisions as interpretations, but the evidence did not bend. When the session ended, he faced indictment for perjury. The court later sentenced him to 8 months of probation. He walked out pale, understanding that even a light sentence carried heavy weight for a detective who had once framed himself as trustworthy. The consequences extended beyond the officers. The civil lawsuit moved swiftly once the disciplinary decisions were announced. Attorney Tom Rivera assembled the claims of 27 victims into a single narrative. It told of repeated stops, invasive interrogations, and unlawful searches. The evidence formed a unified account that no institution could dismiss. The city considered fighting the case, but the political climate, the video, and the public outcry made resistance both futile and costly. After negotiations, the lawsuit settled for $450,000. Marcus refused personal enrichment. He donated his share to a new community reform fund. His decision reflected the principle he carried into every part of the investigation. Justice was not a transaction. It was a responsibility. as the settlement became public. The officers involved reacted with mixed emotions. Riley faced the most severe consequences. His suspension turned into termination. His termination led to criminal charges for falsifying reports. His legal defense strained his finances, and the personal settlement of $150,000 he ultimately owed left him in a state of deep financial burden. His once steady reputation collapsed. He felt the consequences not only in courtrooms, but in conversations he could no longer enter. He withdrew from his former colleagues. His world shrank. He lived with the knowledge that the stop he initiated had not only ended his career, but revealed a pattern that could no longer be hidden. Wilkins adjusted to his new role with quiet humility. The transfer removed him from the environment that had shaped his silence. He began attending counseling for officers dealing with institutional pressures. He cooperated fully with the Department of Justice investigators, offering insights others had refused to share. His journey forward was not easy, but he carried a determination to rebuild. Step by step, Hayes, once respected and feared, found her legacy reshaped. She attempted to appeal the pension decision, but the case held firm. She had built her career on the belief that protecting the department meant protecting the culture. Now she saw that culture dissolve beneath the weight of evidence she had ignored. Kane's future remained uncertain. Probation marked him legally safe, but professionally isolated. No department would hire him. His reputation followed him into every application process. He spent his days reading documents he once manipulated, understanding only now the fragility of trust he had broken. Throughout this period, the Department of Justice intensified its involvement. Investigators reviewed records, interviewed community members, and met with Civilian Office of Police Accountability staff. They visited precinct offices and examined training modules. Their presence signaled a federal acknowledgement that the issues uncovered were not limited to a single night. They belonged to a system that needed structural change. The city watched. Families discussed the case around dinner tables. Churches held forums. Community organizations formed support groups for people who had lived through similar stops. Conversations once whispered became public, and the narrative that had begun with a single stop expanded into a broader conversation about responsibility and oversight. As evening settled over the city one night, Marcus sat alone at his desk reviewing a simple summary sheet. It listed the disciplinary outcomes in clear, unembellished lines. He read them once more, not with satisfaction, not with triumph, but with solemn understanding. Accountability had come, imperfect, necessary, real, and the consequences, though significant, were only the beginning. The fall had arrived, and Chicago now stood on the edge of a new chapter, one that demanded more than reaction. It demanded change. The reform began with a single sentence read aloud in a quiet chamber of City Hall. It did not ring like a victory speech. It did not thunder with drama. It landed with calm, steady weight. The new directive stated that Chicago would no longer allow pretextual traffic stops for minor equipment violations. No more stops for an unlit license plate bulb. No more detentions for hairline cracks in taillights. No more searches made possible through excuses crafted on the side of the road. The rule was simple. The intent was transformative, and the city felt the impact almost immediately. In the first year, traffic stops dropped by 28% for many residents. That reduction felt like a release of pressure they had carried for years. The long stretch of Interstate 90 that ran through the city's dividing lines became less of a stage for suspicion and more of a road for ordinary life. The change did not erase the past. It did not heal every wound, but it broke a pattern that had held firm for too long. Inside the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, the atmosphere shifted. The investigation had tightened bonds among the staff. They had worked with precision, endured long hours, and faced pressure from every direction. And when the reforms were announced, a quiet moment of reflection passed through the team. Sarah Nguyen stood in the conference room, holding the final report from the Department of Justice in her hands. She read the summary carefully. The federal findings confirmed everything she and Marcus had fought to reveal. The unit had engaged in discriminatory practices. Leadership had failed to intervene, and the system itself had allowed misconduct to flourish. The Department of Justice recommended continued oversight, new training protocols, and structural changes to the department. Sarah closed the report with a sense of clarity. The investigation had not been a single event. It had been a turning point, while the department adapted to new rules. Marcus weighed a decision that had been growing quietly in his mind. His work at the Civilian Office of Police Accountability had shaped him. It had strengthened his sense of duty. But the events of the past year had shifted something inside him. He saw that institutional oversight, while essential, was only one part of the landscape. Communities needed voices not tied to government buildings. They needed independent guardians who could stand outside political pressures. The more he thought about the direction of the city, the more certain he became. He would resign, not out of frustration, not out of defeat, but out of the clear understanding that his next chapter required a different vantage point. He announced his decision during a staff meeting. The room fell silent. Some fought tears, others looked down with gratitude. Marcus spoke with a calm that carried warmth. "Our work has mattered," he said, "and it will continue. But I believe I can serve this city better from the outside, building something new that strengthens the foundation we have shaped here." Sarah felt the words deeply. She had walked beside him through the entire investigation. She understood his choice. She also understood the responsibility that would now fall to her. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder before leaving the room. "You are ready," he said. She nodded, and the conviction in her eyes gave him quiet reassurance. At home. Marcus sat with Anna at their kitchen table. This time. He was not weary from a long night. He was thoughtful, present. He told her the plan he had carried privately for weeks. He wanted to create an independent oversight nonprofit, focused on transparency, community education, and long-term reform. Anna listened carefully. She had seen him carry the investigation through its darkest moments. She saw the way the work had shaped him. "If this allows you to breathe again," she said, "then it is the right step." Her support steadied him. It reminded him that the heart of his work had always been anchored in home. In another part of the city, Elijah Thompson, Marcus's father, prepared for a drive he had avoided for decades. Interstate 90 had become a stretch of road he once feared. It held memories of a night in 1992 that remained etched in his mind. The taillight accusation, the blows to his side, the fear that followed him for years. But on this day, he decided to face it again. He stepped into his car, started the engine, and began the drive. The road was quiet. Traffic flowed steadily. No patrol cars pulled out behind him. He placed his hands firmly on the wheel and let the years fall away. For the first time in a long while, he felt the absence of dread. He felt the possibility. When he reached the end of the stretch, he stopped at a gas station, rested his hands on the dashboard, and allowed himself a slow exhale. It was not a victory. It was a quiet reclaiming. As the year closed, the city gathered for a public address outside City Hall. Residents filled the plaza. Some came with personal stories of stops that had shaped their lives. Others came because the investigation had stirred something hopeful inside them. Community leaders stood together. Journalists held microphones. Activists held posters displaying the statistics that had driven the reform. A podium stood in the center, simple and unadorned. Marcus stepped forward. The crowd quieted. He wore a dark suit, steady posture, calm presence. When he began to speak, his voice carried the natural rhythm of someone who understood the power of clarity. This year has changed our city, he said, not because of a single incident, but because the truth found light. We have seen the consequences of silence. We have seen the harm of unchecked power, and we have learned the importance of oversight that does not blink. He paused. The plaza remained still. A broken taillight is no longer an excuse. He said, the sentence struck the air with gentle force. It is no longer a doorway to fear. It is no longer a justification for suspicion. It is no longer a barrier between the people and their right to dignity. The crowd responded with quiet applause at first, then something fuller, carried by shared understanding. It was not a celebration of one man. It was a reflection of a community that refused to return to what it once tolerated. As Marcus stepped back from the podium, he looked across the plaza and saw his father in the front row. Their eyes met. Elijah nodded once, slowly, with a look that held decades of memory and a new sense of peace. Marcus felt the moment settle in his chest. He knew the work ahead would be long. He knew reform did not arrive in a single law or a single investigation, but he also knew the city had taken a real step forward. The night settled around City Hall. Lights cast soft reflections on the pavement. People lingered, speaking in hushed but hopeful tones, and as Marcus walked away from the podium, he carried with him the quiet conviction that truth, once revealed, cannot be undone. Chicago stood on new ground, and the path forward, though uncertain, held the promise of a future shaped by accountability, courage, and resolve. Thank you for watching this story. Your support means a great deal. If you would like more stories like this, please subscribe and leave a like. It helps the channel grow.